Wisconsin, we find hope. Hope in the hands of the jolly Acme Applejack, Gene Kayak. This hope is many things. Hope for innovation and revolution in the industry. Hope for cinemas and physical distribution. Hope for independent artists, but also hope for video games? Let me explain this part. The Hollywood pipeline is currently bursting at the seams with video game adaptations. As much as we deny it and as much as people hide behind the wall of hate watching, people almost exclusively pay to watch what they already know. Hollywood is already on their third or fourth remakes of the things that they like pumping out already, and they aren't very literate, so they can't think of any more books to adapt. So, video games. This is a deep well of established IP stemming from a ravenous market which has just begun to mature. The struggle is that most of these films take the paint or appearance of the game that they're adapting, but they struggle to convey the experience of actually playing the game itself in either an accurate or meaningful way. So when you take out all of the mechanics and are just left with the stories, you just have this. And yes, there are exceptions like The Last of Us on HBO, but these rare cases usually match the DNA of the original so well because those games are inherently cinematic and emulating film. Thus, it's easier to adapt naturally and faithfully. We'll see how the Until Dawn movie does when it comes out because clearly they're making an attempt to movieify the concept of the butterfly effect, but I don't really have my money on that going well. In my mind, this little film called Hundreds of Beavers, produced for only $150,000, is the first film to truly reverse engineer this trend and emulate the qualities of a video game meaningfully into the film format. To make my point, we need to contrast the construction of the film against game design principles and examine its mechanics. The experience of playing any video game is defined by its mechanics. These mechanics are abilities or tools given to the player that determine the boundaries of how they can or cannot interact with the world that has been created for them. Might be obvious, but in the tutorial of a game, there are only a few options that are typically at your disposal, but more will unlock over time. Like in a Zelda or a Metroid game, you can acquire new gear, weapons, and abilities as the game progresses, which offer up more and more options for your play moving forward. In Metroid's case, these new unlocks also carry implications on how you can now interact with the areas of the world that you have previously explored. The idea here is that these mechanics will synergize so that you can begin remixing them in interesting ways and play with the tools at your disposal. An amazing example is found in the recent Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown by Ubisoft. Here, you have clearly determined traversal and combat mechanics, but as the game progresses, you start to see how these abilities synergize, and there is no real separation or singular use for these mechanics. And inside, the game teaches you the simple mechanics of how to run, how to jump, and then how to pull items. This is preparing you for when you must utilize all three of those in unique ways in the upcoming puzzles. There's a sense of teaching, remixing, and testing your skills until you come to the ultimate mastery. There's a natural escalation that comes with the drip feed and integration of various mechanics. So backing up, how does this relate to Hundreds of Beavers? The box quote of the film is "From zero to hero." This is an accurate implication of the escalation found in the film, because after the prologue, we're cast into the world with the protagonist and he has no abilities there. Everything has been taken from him. Similarly to a video game, mechanics begin being introduced, paced out, and then remixed. Let's look at the first 15 or so minutes of the film and see how this happens. So let's go back to that Applejack farm. Well, it all burns down and people die. It's from this starting point that Gene has nothing. He must learn to survive in this landscape. And now we have a clean slate to introduce our mechanics. The first mechanic introduced in the film is what I call flushing snow at 3:43. He tries to pull himself out of the snow here, but the branch serves as a toilet cord and he instead flushes snow onto his head, burying him deeper. This mechanic isn't carried super far into the film, but is used to establish what the film is all about. We'll see it brought back momentarily. Next, at 4:16, as he is emotionally grieving the loss of his farm, we introduce the tunnels. Wisconsin is cold. He decides to make a fire to warm himself. Here at 4:45, we introduce the wind. This results in him catching on fire. Already, he is learning to repurpose the mechanics that he has already run into, when at 5:31, he flushes himself intentionally this time to put out the fire. Gene begins growing hungry, and some shenanigans ensue as he tries to snag a pesky rabbit. He falls into the tunnels a few more times at 5:55 and later at 9:23. We see the wind come back into play at 7:02, which reveals a new mechanic. The rolling snowball. We see him playing with this for a few minutes. He's been to a few different locations now, and what has happened in each of them? Well, he's fallen into the tunnels. At 9:20, he starts realizing what the use of this mechanic might be, which will come into play later in the film. After he confronts the beavers for the first time, night falls again at 11:35, and he has evolved in how he might deal with the wind until... Now it's morning and he hasn't been able to catch those darn rabbits, so naturally, he's famished. He comes across some eggs at 12:05, so he puts his snowball skills back to use, which introduces a new mechanic, the icicle. We watch for a few minutes as the mechanic expresses its comedic function. Much like flushing the branch though, while it is introduced as a gag, the useful nature of such a mechanic will become evident with time. He fights back at 12:36 in the only way he has learned how so far. Gene makes it up to the eggs and gives them a good whistle. Two mechanics are introduced at once. The whistle, which summons the woodpecker, and the thistles when he falls into the bush. He learns from his mistakes after some trial and error and claims his egg victoriously. That evening, it's cooking time, and thanks to his expert snowball abilities, he forges some snow women to protect him from the wind from every angle. But alas, there's more to learn. At this point, I hope you're starting to get it. In the first roughly 14 minutes of the film, 7 mechanics have been introduced, and each of them are used pretty well. Gene Kayak explored the Applejack site, the woods, and the prairie. In each location, new mechanics were learned that he was able to carry over into the adapting process in each of the other locales. You'll see how each of these mechanics are taken even further to crazy logical extremes, all under the lens of him trying to survive, feed himself, and take revenge on those beavers. At least, those are his motivations in the first act, and more on that later. It's very important to understand that these mechanics and locales are plotted out and remixed specifically to first be entertaining, second be obstacles to the character, and then third be tools for the character once he has learned them. In movie language, these are essentially just serving as setups and payoffs. This movie is like a payoff heaven, and it results in honestly some of the most satisfying writing I've ever experienced, despite lacking a real screenplay. Also, it's a silent movie. There's no dialogue. I want to coin this approach to filmmaking as the first SANDBOX film. My definition for this would be a film that delights in discovery through the consistent remixing of mechanics that define the rules of play. I enjoyed the first half of The Wild Robot fine for its sense of discovery, but then the movie completely fell apart in the second half when it became narratively tropey and bland. I think of the visual sections of Pixar films like the opening of Up or WALL-E, or the opening stretch in Paris from Ratatouille where he's discovering his relationship with Linguini. Hundreds of Beavers takes that encapsulated feeling and turns it into the entire experience. Isn't that an exciting medium to create more worlds to live in? There's such an opportunity to craft universes for the audience to be immersed in here because the world inherently becomes a character through this structure. You know the environment just as well as you know the people that live in it. I mentioned that the film had no script, and this is true, but don't be deceived because it was carefully storyboarded. I want us to now imagine plotting out this film with 3x5 cards, or the beat board in Final Draft. Let's start by laying out the 7 mechanics and the 3 locations from these first 15 minutes that we've just talked about on the beat board. The process is now to make these pieces interact with each other in order to create scenes and moments. Go through and make sure that these overlap in as many ways as possible. It's honestly a really good Kickstarter for creativity. Now, I think there's a lot to learn with this approach to filmmaking, but there are even more ways just than this in Hundreds of Beavers that resemble a video game. First, the structure and escalation. In the first 2 acts, the character is building himself up to being the true fur trapper that he was meant to become, and then the 3rd act is pure cinematic bliss that allows him to take advantage of everything that he's learned and truly up the ante. This structure is quite similar to a Metroidvania. Second is the item shop. Much of the film follows Gene Kayak killing the pesky beavers and dragging them back to this shop to purchase new equipment, to then head back into the world and slaughter even more of them. This is the type of feedback loop that you would find in a game, especially a roguelike like Hades. The presentation of the item shop is very Mario Bros. Or Zelda, and there's even theme music that pops up every time he comes near the shop. Third, there is a world map that is reincorporated throughout the film. This allows each of the locales in the movie to feel like different worlds in a Mario game, each offering up new biomes and challenges to test your skills in. But there's a cycle of trekking through each of these places over and over, as a fur trapper would to investigate his previously laid traps, that lends itself to the mechanical reincorporation over and over, consistently expanding each world with the new abilities gained. In the sober commentary for the film, the director Matt Cheslick is talking about how that process of him going around the trap line both displays the accuracy of what it is to be a fur trapper, but it also allowed them to hit on the same points 3 times, because he was saying that, 1 time or 3 times can be funny, but never 2. So creating that cycle was something that was reinforcing kind of the comedic elements of it, but also made these setups and payoffs and reincorporations stronger for the story, which is a really cool touch. Fourth is just that fun doesn't have to compromise quality or journey. I do genuinely believe that this film is of the utmost quality, and I don't have to hide that behind an ounce of irony. It's very self-assured of its vision. The commitment and intentionality behind all of its decisions earns it a rank up with my favorite films. There isn't a lot of substance to Gene Kayak as a protagonist, but he is honestly one of the better protagonists in recent memory because of how we're cast through the entire journey with him. From the get-go, he has a very basic but specific goal. He's also a blank enough slate that we can just insert ourselves into his situation while identifying with his own desires as well. The story kicks off with his want, which is to take revenge on the beavers and restore his Applejack farm that is raised in the prologue, as well as just hunger and survival management. But as the story progresses, his need is revealed to him. In the third act, he must reconcile between the two and sacrifice his want for his need. This truly fulfills him as a changed character and a better man. This escalation from going from zero to hero is expressed well through his character design progression as well. There's so much more that I could say about this film, but I just want to leave you with this glowing recommendation of Hundreds of Beavers. I tried to leave a lot of the film out of this video to save some mystery, because honestly just going on the journey of discovery this film has to offer is something magical that I wouldn't want to rob you of. I really think there's just such a deep well to tap into here that we could learn from this film. I hope you'll all be inspired like I have to go out and try designing your own sandbox film. Thanks for watching this episode, guys. If you enjoyed it or found it informative, please leave it a like and subscribe. If you thought it could have been better though, maybe give it a thumbs down and leave me some constructive criticisms in the comments below. Thanks guys, I'll see you later.